Alright, welcome back to Honored Madman. Today we're going to be talking about the lore of the starting classes. Now that's the ones from the actual game, not the ones from the network test. The ones from the network test are actually a little more interesting in my opinion, or some of them, but we'll talk about them some other time, or not at all, considering they aren't even accessible anymore. But without further ado, let us start with the prisoner, my favorite starting class.
Give us beer before I skin you.
A man does not choose his companions. These two, they have no courtesy. A man must ask forgiveness.
So going off the description of the prisoner, it can be assumed that he lived amongst the noble elites prior to being imprisoned. The fact that he starts with a carrion sorcery, specifically the prototype one that the knights used, suggests that he was probably a page for the carrion nobles at some point before he was sentenced. Maybe even some kind of relative of theirs. But if they weren't a relative, then they were probably just a friend of the family, similar to how Witch Hunter Jaren was. But at the very least, I think it's safe to assume that they were a page serving the carrion royal family in some way, possibly under one of the enchanted knights. It's tough to say what the crime they committed was, but it could just be the fact that they were born with the grace of gold, a tarnished. The carrions are descendants of the astrologers, and the astrologers kind of declined heavily after the Golden Order came around, so perhaps someone being born and just appearing to have the grace of gold could be seen as an appalling crime, an act of blasphemy amongst the carrions and the astrologers. It's really tough to say. They possess an antiquated charm in the form of the rift shield, and it's said to be, antiquated, so that suggests that they were banished a really long time ago, or imprisoned a really long time ago. The antiquated charm, the rift shield, it sort of looks like an eye too, so maybe there's a connection to the Flame of Frenzy maybe. The prisoner also wears the same clothes as Prawn Guy, and since we know Prawn Guy was locked up with the Dung Eater, it's also possible that this prisoner starting class was at some point locked up with both of them. But neither one will recognize you, and that's like pretty much a stretch. It's just something I thought worth noting, that they're wearing the same thing and are all prisoners. I mean, obviously the Dung Eater wears his omen armor, but Blackguard and the prisoner class could just be wearing standard issue fits for prisoners, like in Oblivion, how they give you the same sackcloth fit every time you go to jail. Apparently when you're in prison in the lands between, they don't let you wash, which I guess is not uncommon for prisons. But going off the description of the prisoner's clothes, it says that they've never been washed and are thoroughly smelly, basically thoroughly dirty, which could just be another way of them mentally breaking their prisoners. Makes sense to me. Basically not allowing them to shower. Sounds about right. I imagine it didn't bother the Dung Eater that much. I mean, you've activated my gamer card. That's probably how he felt. The helmet the prisoner wears was said to have been designed to torment the wearer, either slowly fermenting a powerful hatred in them or a spiritual fervor that was indistinguishable from it. To me, I take this as the helmet having been designed to either drive them crazy or make them hate the carrion royal family, or hate the fact that they were tarnished, or have the reverse effect and make them insanely dedicated to the tarnished cause, or the grace of gold and all that. Or maybe if they committed some other crime, just a super strong dedication to that crime they committed, and a super strong hatred of the carrion nobles. Obviously, a lot of people have said this character is sort of like a Griffith origin, and that's mainly because of the helmet and the background of having lived among the elite and all that good stuff. But when I first saw it, I thought it was Man in the Iron Mask, but that appears to be more Blackguard's territory. His mask is a lot closer to the actual Man in the Iron Mask, to me. The prisoner's Iron Mask kind of reminds me of Bazuzo from the old Berserk anime from the 90s, but with like a strangely more alien kind of design. I really like the prisoner's iron helmet in this game. It looks like one eye is completely, you can't see through it, and the other one is sort of like squinting in a way. I thought it was really cool. When I first saw it in the first little commercial we got for Elden Ring, I was like, damn, I need to get that helmet, and boom, it ended up being the starting class. So that's the prisoner, lived amongst the elite and studied glintstone sorcery, specifically carrion in this case. And we're moving on to the next one. The warrior, or the swordsman as I call him. This seems to be the class most reminiscent of the Wanderer class or the Swordsman class or the Sellsword classes from the previous Dark Souls games. So this anime-looking swordsman is a member of the nomadic tribe of curved sword-wielding swordsmen, specifically the tribe that Melinia's mentor was a part of, the famous blind swordsman who defeated and sealed away an ancient god of rot a long time ago. He was the originator of the flowing sword style, and he taught stuff to Melinia, probably like the waterfowl dance, stuff like that. So there's enough reason to hate that dude right there, I guess, if you have trouble with that. So it's possible this starting class is a descendant of that dude. That'd be really cool, or at least a member of the same tribe that he was once from. The blue outfit was said to symbolize water, the art of flowing water, That's why they were nomadic. They were constantly moving and traveling, They opposed stagnation. And rot is born of stagnation, so, there's the whole thing there. Rot is also a cycle, though. Stuff is reborn from the rot. It's a whole thing. But that seems to be why the blind swordsman was so against the rot god, was the whole flowing water versus stagnation thing. It's a big part of, Japanese mythology or Shinto mythology, I think. I'm probably getting that wrong, but I watched a video on it a while back, but I was kind of stoned. But anyway, moving on. This class starts with 2 scimitars, but it appears that the shamshir is a more adequate weapon for them, as this class was said to be an origin of exceptional technique, and the shamshir apparently requires exceptional technique to wield, so it just seemed kind of fitting. There's also the flowing sword that's found in the consecrated snowfield's hearse, or one of the hearses that's out there, and it appears that the blind swordsman got some kind of a hero's burial, or maybe his descendant did or something, but he probably wielded 2 of these bad boys, and we only find 1. So, who knows where the other one's at. But it seems like a really fitting weapon for this character. But alright, moving on to the next one. The Prophet.
The truth is written in the blood of the innocent, there in the chapel of love. Can you not read the ancient runes?
Now, I started this game as a strength faith build, so I went Prophet in the beginning, and I had a really fun time with it. So these poor bastards were followers of the faith of the Erd Tree and the Golden Order and all that, and they had prophetic visions of their faith ending in fire. Now, what did they get for these doomsaying visions? Well, they got ostracized by the entire community and basically turned into some kind of joke and pariahs. They wear these either a wheel or a board around their neck, so people will just make fun of them for it. They have to wear blindfolds because basically to ridicule their faith in their visions. Basically saying if your faith is so strong in your visions, why do you even need your eyes? You shouldn't be able to see. You know what I mean? You don't need that. It's like they were actively trying to create another Shibriri or something. So the visions they had of their faith ending in fire could either be referring to the Erd Tree being burnt inevitably by the protagonist, or perhaps the Flame of Frenzy ending, and that's a lot more sinister. That's what I thought at first, but then, I played the game a little bit and I was like, oh no, this is probably referring to the Flame of Ruin, not the Flame of Frenzy. But either way, it's their faith ending in flames, and they were ridiculed and ostracized for it. I mean, look what happened to the merchants of the Great Caravan. They got accused of a crime and then buried underneath the fucking ground, and then they prayed and summoned the Flame of Frenzy. Through their despair, the vessel fingers for the Flame of Frenzy just appeared deep below the capital. So, this is what it gets you, ridiculing these prophets for their visions. Or it just gets you a burnt Erd Tree in the long run, and they get vindicated. Corin, who looks a bit like the prophet from the network test, has really strong faith in the fingers still, despite being forced to wear a wheel and a blindfold. He even goes and seeks out Gold Mask only to be driven insane, and I don't really want to spoil the rest, but I already spoiled some of it. It's an interesting correlation, though, the fact that the Flame of Frenzy appears in people's eyes and these guys are forced to wear blindfolds. But basically, the prophet is just a seer ostracized for auspicious beliefs, according to a description. And they basically got the shit into the stick for it, but that's really all there is about them. I really wish they would have started with the club in the actual game and not just in the network test, instead of the stupid spear they start with. So next up, we have the confessors. The The main job of the confessors was basically to follow Tarnish that strayed from the guidance of grace. Basically, Tarnish that went to go join stuff like the Volcano Manor or the Festering Fingers of Mog, stuff that opposed the Golden Order. They were sent out by the Two Fingers to do this, and were given a number of incantations to pull these deeds off. They were called the Assassins of the Round Table Hold, as they themselves were once tarnished who had strayed from the grace. I guess it's a bit like Sun Tzu says, and you gotta know your enemy as well as you know yourself, and you'll fight in many battles and all that. So these guys are basically like the silent hand of the faith, basically assassins and silent operators for the faith of the Erd Tree and the Two Fingers. Very similar to like the healing churches of Bloodborne. They hunt things deemed impure to the Erd Tree and all that, but in like a covert manner. They have a slightly different but overall similar job to the fundamentalists and their hunters of the undead. Except these guys probably also hunt like the Albinorics for being artificial life forms, and the depraved perfumers for being heretics. Basically stuff like that. Anything that's like a heretic to the Erd Tree, they go out and they silently hunt. They've got a bit in common with like the Vigilant of Stendarr from Skyrim, or like the Witch Hunters of The Witcher, or even the Templars from Dragon Age, if you've played any of those series. Essentially the faith version of a Spellblade or a Battle Mage. Basically just a morally gray paladin. Whenever I hear the word confessor, I always think of Confessor Cromwell from Fallout 3. I can't tell you why, but it just, there he goes, chanting, you know, behold Adam's glow. Anyway, moving on. Next up, we've got the astrologers, another really cool class lore-wise in my opinion.
Okay, Goth. Is that a peace sign?
Ooh, Goth. What's your favorite color?
Dude, it's yes or no questions. I just said it.
So, glintstone sorcery was founded when an ancient astrologer saw like starfall through his telescope, and then it became real. Like, and it rained down upon the land, and the amber of the stars, you know, rained from the heavens, and that amber became glintstone. But these ancient astrologers also lived in the faraway North Mountains, probably at places like the Stargazer ruins in the mountaintops of giants, because they were said to be the neighbors of giants in ancient times. One particularly badass astrologer would discover a full moon sort of outer god type thing and would charm the academy with it, and you know, the rest is history there. But she founded her own royal house and became the governor of the famous Rea Lucaria Academy for Sorcerers. And she started off as a lowly astrologer. Of course, when the Golden Order and the Age of the Erd Tree came around, Carian astrology would wither on the vine and slowly die off. It would slowly, you know, decline more and more, and then it's not even really practiced by the events of the game, because basically when Radagon ran off on Renala, the Academy rebelled against her, and they were forced to fight this little civil war down in Liurnia. But that's enough of the history lesson. That's exactly why the astrologers are referred to as the heirs of glintstone sorcery, because their ancestors are the ones who founded it. They saw the primeval current become real right before their very eyes, and then they based sorcery to kind of harness its power. But on to the next one. The vagabond. Now, I guess you could say he's a Western medieval version of the main character from the hit manga series, Vagabond, but I think his helmet looks a little too much like Shrek's for that to be the case. His armor sort of looks like a more personalized version of the stock knight armor that you can get from the Finger Maidens. Definitely more dirty, rusty, and more lived in, but it's got a cool white cape, I think. The helmet's visor is actually broken, that's why it doesn't close. I thought that was kind of funny. Dude calls himself a knight, but he's going around in a busted ass helmet. For some reason, the overall armor set kind of reminds me of the Lord of the Rings films, but that's just because it looks like it's a traveling knight set, you know, and they were all like, well, they were accompanied by traveling knights, so I don't know, that's why it kind of reminded me of Lord of the Rings a little bit. The helmet, though, definitely reminds me of Shrek from the tournament in Shrek 1. But the owner of this particular set was said to have been banished, so maybe he could be part of the banished knights, but he's obviously wearing a very different set than they are. He could just be equally banished or exiled. That could just be, you know, similar wording. I think it is. I think that's a bit of a stretch to say he's one of the banished knights, but he's just a banished knight. Anyway, there's not much about him, so moving on. Another one there isn't a whole lot about, the bandit.
You're an up-jumped cutthroat. Nothing more.
That's exactly who I am.
First off, this is obviously like the thief class from previous games. He's even got the fat knife. I think the knife looks a lot cooler in this game than it did in previous ones though. The great knife. His starting outfit's pretty cool too. He's got a Kakashi mask and just like a regular shirt and vest. It's also worth noting that the Ravenmount assassins wear the bandit set, but with like raven feather cloak all over it and shit like that, and like adornments. Basically like an edgy version of the bandit set. They make the set edgy. The description for this guy is basically just a deadly bandit who targets weak points, and that sounds about right. This guy's like a stealth character. He reminds me of Volk from Fire Emblem. And the last time we had a bandit class, they had a really stupid looking starting outfit. I think this is a nice change of pace. Because I think Dark Souls 2 had a bandit, and I think it looked really stupid. But I thought it was worth noting that they wear like the similar set to the Ravenmount assassins, because it's like the assassin set in Dark Souls 3 and the Black Hand set. They were like just upgrades of each other, or like a downgrade of each other. Alright, next up we've got the hero class. The black headdress they wear was said to have only been given to the Badlands' most elite warriors, it being proof that they slaughtered countless foes. These warriors followed the example of their famous chieftain Horaloo, also known as Godfrey, who was said to have shunned excess, and that's why he wears, such a almost Spartan-esque outfit. I always call this one the warrior class because Nefeli is like, I'm Nefeli-Lu, warrior, and Godfrey is like, I'm Horaloo, warrior, and they both wear this set, and they're both from the Badlands, just like this starting class. This one's said to have been descended from a Badlands chief, so you could literally be Nefeli's relative and Godfrey's descendant if you start this class. I mean, I'm going to go into at the end why I'm not sure if every Tarnished is Godfrey's literal offspring, or descendant, but in this case, I think it's safe to assume that yeah, you're probably Godfrey's, descendant and offspring in this one. Now, this starting class is a very, very accurate Kratos cosplay, in my opinion. I mean, you could even make your character look a lot like Kratos without any real effort at all. Just, make the dude bald, give him a beard, paint him white, give him, red face paint. But this isn't about that. These guys are said to be from the notorious and extremely mysterious Badlands that I wish I could learn more about. Maybe in the DLC, but someone commented the other day and said, everybody thinks that a lot of these questions are going to get answered in DLC, but I know they won't. And I think that that's very likely. I think that not much of these mysteries are going to get solved in any DLC, but I like to picture these Badlands as a sort of Elden Ring style Mad Max type area. Maybe looking a bit like Radahn's Battlefield without all the red, but like desert and cliffs and, Badlands and all that. Next up, we have the world-famous Samurai class. So this starting class is a capable warrior from the mysterious land of reeds. So this mysterious, isolated nation is said to be locked in a bloody civil war, which, could be a reference to Sekiro, but I don't really like to subscribe to the idea that all of the Souls games are connected, in the same timeline. I believe Yura, the famous Ronin and bloody festering finger hunter, was once from there, and the armor to me looks straight out of Neo, and I got a kick out of that because I'm a big Neo fan. Obviously, historical samurai armor is based on the real thing and all that, but I played a lot of Neo, so, it was the first thing I thought of. Well, that and, like, old samurai movies like Seven Samurai, or even more recent ones like Tom Cruise's flick that I think, in my opinion, gets a bad rap, because Ken Watanabe is great in that, and Hiroyuki Sanada was also badass in that. But I digress. There's another suit of Reed's armor in the game, the White Reed set, that's worn by the Inaba, who are said to be the disciples of the famous swordsman Okina. Now, Okina was this badass swordsman who many know as the wielder of Rivers of Blood, but he also whooped Mog's ass to the point where Mog was like, hey, hold up. Let me give you a portion of my power, and you could just maybe serve me so we don't have to keep fighting. And I'm guessing he agreed. It said Okina rose to a higher plane, basically, but I think that just means when he was given a piece of a demigod's power, he sort of became more than mortal. And he became a demon in a sense because he served an evil demigod. There's also like a reoccurring blood theme when it comes to the Lands of Reeds because Okina serves the blood god, and so does Eleonora, who Yura's hunting, and maybe was possibly Yura's lover in the past. But that's really all I got to say about the samurai class. I kind of digressed there, but he's a powerful warrior who starts with a katana and a longbow, and he's very much straight out of a old Kurosawa movie. But moving on to everybody's favorite class, the wretch.
Witness me, bloody! Witness!
As Boba Fett once said, sometimes fate steps in to rescue the wretched, and that's the best description for the wretch starting class, because they were basically some unlucky fuck who got grave robbed probably, and then they rose back to life when they got Grace of Gold, and then they found this really solid club. Now, a club is really all you need in this game, and you could, accessorize when it comes to your clubs. There's so many different ones. For once in a FromSoft game, there's like 5 or 6 different clubs, I think. There's the curved club, the regular club, the stone club, the large club, the spiked club, the great club, and I think the stone digger club. There's a lot of clubs in this game, and so you've got a lot to choose from if you're trying to be a caveman. But they're very much the depraved class of this game. They're considered a poor, purposeless sod. Naked as the day they were born. A nice club is all they have. And let me tell you, that's really all they need. The clubs are my favorite weapons in the Soul series, so you know what I mean? That's really all you need. I mean, honestly, screw armor. There's nothing more satisfying than whooping someone like Melania while being butt-ass naked and using a club. It's definitely a very satisfying feeling. And if you want, you can put on the gold mask and, dye your character the color of a dark elf and run around as Dagoth with a club. What's more fun than that? That's how you achieve godhood. I mean, he's the best character that an Elder Scrolls game ever had. Besides Sheogorath, of course, but this isn't about that. But this game's really fun because you can bash your heart's content out with any club, Like I said, there's plenty of different choices in this one. And being a caveman has never been easier. With all these options, you'll be getting casting calls to do Geico commercials like it's 2006 again. The wretch is a great class, though, because deep down, we've all got a little bit of wretch in us. We're all a little wretched. So, as I previously said, I don't think that every Tarnished is literally Godfrey's descendant. Surely some of them are quite literally, can trace their lineage back to Godfrey. But I doubt that that's all of them, because the Tarnished, I read somewhere, were the armies of Godfrey also. But they might have just been people who were just once loyal to him, like the descendants of his followers and all that. Sort of like how Beowulf ran around with a bunch of loyal warriors. I think Godfrey sort of did, and these are their descendants possibly, and his. But before I go, I wanted to talk about the starting races briefly. So starting with the warrior, I mean, there's not much there. The most common face of a Tarnished. They were all once warriors, Cool. But the Night Folk, I think, are, not to be confused with the Nightkin from Fallout or the Night Folk from Red Dead Redemption. They could be Silver Tears or the descendants of them, maybe, or perhaps they're descended from the Nox, like some believe. It's really hard to say. But Nox, as I stated in a previous video, have a really tan complexion, and the Silver Tears are very pale, and they're said to bleed silver, and the Nox do not bleed silver. As seen in the game, though, sometimes Silver Tears don't need to copy anything directly. It can just turn into a stock warrior or a stock troll. So, very possible that they could be Silver Tears. The aristocrat is likely either a noble from Liurnia or Leyndell, possibly, a Carian noble, possibly a Leyndell noble. The loner, a proud and seclusive tribe of folk, well-versed in legends and heresies alike. Could be from the Badlands, or could be referring to the nomadic tribe of swordsmen. who were familiar with the sealing away of the rock god and all that stuff. That could be the heresies referenced in their description. The northerner race of the mountaintops, basically I think these guys are the kite and sellswords and the flame guardians and flame monks, or at least the race they came from. They're said to be descended from giants and are pretty large, pale, and hardy folk. Basically like the Nords of Skyrim or Scandinavian people in real life. But they hail from the unforgiving north. Anyway, moving on. Seafarer. This is actually the race I picked, I think, the first character I made. It says, the face of one who wanders the seas in search of their home in the lands between. The Tarnished left in boats, but one went missing, I think, when they originally left on the boats after Godfrey lost his grace. I think it has something to do with that whole wreckage site down in the Weeping Peninsula where there's all these sledge zombies on the coast near a bunch of shipwrecks. Now, he could be one of the survivors of that shipwreck, or he's just some dude who was a sailor or who came from someplace and now has been called back to the lands between and got here by boat. It's, not much to go on there. But I thought it was funny how he looked like Edward Kenway, the starting seafarer class. Next up, we have the Reedlander, the race of the samurai class. From the isolated land of reeds where blood is a familiar sight. That could be why Eleonora and, Yura and Okina all have this affiliation with blood. But the land of reeds being isolated sort of reminds me of Samurai Champloo, which was set in the Edo period when they had these really strict isolationist policies. And there's like this scene in the Masterpiece anime where they make these guys step on a picture of Christ to show that they don't, believe in Jesus and all that. And how they reacted when they saw the Dutch guy in that one episode. I wanted to make a whole video about the Land of Reeds, but there really isn't that much to go on, and I still plan on covering what little is known about them, along with what is known about Eochaid or Eochaid in a video in the future. But moving on to the Draconians. Basically another type of dragonkin, different from the soldiers and different from the magma worms. They have these stony faces and are the people of the ancient dragons. Despite being the people of dragons, their lives are said to be typically pretty short. So they're just yet another race of dragonkin that got the short end of the stick, basically. They just, you don't want to try to become a dragon in FromSoft games. That's not something you want to do. It always ends bad in every single fucking circumstance. You want to be someone like Havel, who hunts dragons and is there to basically make armor from their scales and a weapon from their tooth. You want to be someone like that. And then last but not least, we have the Newmans, which is the race of Marika, Aragorn, and the Black Knife Assassins. Said to be from another world, long-lived and seldom born. Them being from another world I thought was just like a Lord of the Rings reference because, the Numenor, especially with the whole long-lived and seldom born little bit at the end. But it turns out they actually have a story function. I mean, Marika is a Newman. The Black Knife Assassins were Newmans, said to be scions of the Eternal Cities. Now that, paired with the fact that Marika is often referred to as Queen Marika the Eternal, could suggest that the Newmans showed up and took over the Eternal Cities at some point. And maybe the Nox opposed them, so they just leveled the whole thing and built over it. But while we're on the subject of the Underground, someone pointed out to me that the Claymen's bubble spells use the same sorcery symbol when you cast it as carrion sorceries, and upon closer inspection it's not actually the same symbol, it's just very similar. The carrions have crossed swords or crossed staffs on theirs, and the Claymen's one has a throne apparently on it, similar to the empty throne you can find at the temple of Noxtella, I believe, or the thrones that the big finger maiden looking ladies are sitting in the Eternal Cities, like at the Noxtella Dragonkin Soldiers Arena. But that's really all I have to say about the races and classes right now, so I hope you enjoyed the video. Please like if you liked the video. If you disliked it, then dislike it. If you like my videos in general, please consider subscribing. Got a lot of good stuff coming. The Renala videos up next, then the Mausoleum Knights and Soldiers along with some Deathbird lore. And then I'm going to do a video about the Glintstone Crowns, and I plan on making one video where I try to cover at least a summary of each Tarnished in the game and their goals and motivations that you meet. But that's all for now. I hope you guys have a good day. I'll see you next time. Peace.
Where you been, huh? Where you been?